What's going on, book club? Today, I want to give a review of the Dungeon Crawler Carl series so far. I've read two of the, I believe, six books that are currently written in the series. I've got the first two right here. We've got Dungeon Crawler Carl, and we've got Carl's Doomsday scenario, which is the second book here. And I finished up reading these a few days ago, right before I started my Malazan Book of the Fallen saga, I guess, and I wanted to give a little bit of a review on what I think about this so far. So, for those who are unaware of anything about the Dungeon Crawler Carl series, this is a lit RPG series that follows Carl, who is now stuck in this dungeon crawler game that is the result of aliens coming to Earth, basically destroying everything and saying, "Hey, everyone who wants to live, who's still alive, go through this dungeon, play this game show that is televised on alien TV, and if you can make it to the bottom, you're like free to just have the rest of Earth because we already took all the resources that we care about, and flattened everything." So first and foremost, this is a lit RPG series. If you're unaware of what that genre is, it's basically like the fusion of books and video games, where like RPG role playing games are at the forefront of the book. So in this book, Carl has like an inventory system. He has levels. He has skills that he acquires and like can read books to gain more skills and gain levels. He chooses a class and a race at one point, and he's traversing a typical video game style dungeon where there's like goblins and hobgoblins and like different levels of enemies that get progressively harder as he goes on. There's also bosses of increasing variety. There's like neighborhood bosses, borough bosses, city bosses. And these are all like teased and explained, and eventually you get to actually see some of them throughout the series. Now, one thing that I will say is I'm not in general a fan of lit RPG books. I don't really enjoy the video game aspect of fantasy. I enjoy the like magical spells part of fantasy. So to me, I wasn't really sure if I would like this after reading book one. I gave it a shot because it was recommended so heavily on Reddit. I gave it a shot, and honestly, I for the first time ever was like, oh, actually, this lit RPG thing is not so bad. I didn't really mind the fact that Carl was level 12 or whatever and was gaining levels and skills. There's also, I think what helps is there's so much humor in the book. The author Matt Dinniman is definitely very humor forward. There's achievements that Carl gets throughout this book that all have very funny descriptions by the alien AI that's like running this game show. And all of this is to say that somehow he turned lit RPG into something that's enjoyable to, I think, more than just the typical lit RPG crowd. People that would maybe normally not be interested in books that are more video gamey could actually find enjoyment out of this. I think the lit RPG aspect helps in his storytelling a lot as well, because the way that he sets up the book, there is a dungeon that everyone is set off into, and the dungeon has 18 levels. And book one, he starts off, and I believe he's in the first two levels. And then book two is all about the third level of the dungeon. And throughout the books, he's teasing what's going to happen in lower dungeons. There is consistent teasing about what's happening on level 9 of the dungeon, where like there's some sort of alien battle going on that the crawlers are going to become a part of once they get down there, and how every 3 levels they're a little bit more like an open world sort of game where outside influence can take effect and like various other races can participate in strange ways, and the in between levels are sort of more standard dungeon crawling levels. So we get some of that, that every third level thing takes place in book two, where we finally see like a bit more open of an area where there's quests, and there's also other factions at play outside of the remaining Earth people that are playing this video game, um, that are having some sort of impact on the story. Uh, that alone is sort of driving the plot for me, at least. That's like the most interesting thing to me. I think that Carl leveling up is fun and cool. He also has on the cover you can see he has his cat friend here. I'm a big cat fan, so I think it's funny that Princess Dona is a character that can talk now and is slinging spells with Carl, and they've got this nice little friendship going on. But to me, the most compelling part that's like keeping me reading, and why actually after two books, I did order books 3 through 6, and I have them on my bookshelf. I haven't yet read them, but I do plan to, solely because the amount of like teasing world building that he's done so far with what's going to happen in the later levels is like so interesting to me that I want to keep reading and finding out what's going on there. There's a story around Carl, and he's interacting with these aliens that are hosting this game show, and he gets to go on alien interviews where he's like talking with a studio audience about the game show that he's participating in, and like the bosses that he's killing and all that stuff. And there's like these subtle plot threads going on already where Carl seems to be able to impact a little bit what's actually going on in the greater universe, the like quadrillions of people that exist that are actually watching this television program. And I'm really curious how that part plays into this book, because Carl only has power within the game, within this dungeon itself. Carl doesn't really have the ability to like escape the dungeon and suddenly he's like this powerful guy. But I do wonder if like that may happen in some way. Um, it's also interesting because there are 18 levels to this dungeon, but in the book, it's mentioned that people have only gotten to like level 12 or 13. So it's kind of weird where it feels like he's setting himself up for failure, and like an unsatisfying conclusion where Carl doesn't actually finish the dungeon. People that get to level 12 or 13 can choose to get out of the dungeon, and then they end up working for the dungeon and like their NPCs, and that's like the furthest anyone has ever gotten without dying. So there's a world where this is all setting up to Carl becoming just an NPC eventually, and it kind of sucks for him. Or there's a world where Carl is able to explore these like floors 13 through 18 that nobody has ever seen before, where Matt has to invent some crazy shit in order for Carl to actually like have some satisfying conclusion. So it's very unique. It's very interesting. I'm very interested in where the author takes it, and if he sort of can follow through on some of the promises that have been delivered um, so far in the first two books, and some of the like foreshadowing that's been thrown in there. Um, so overall, I'm going to keep reading the series. I plan on right now. I'm reading Malazan Book of the Fallen, Book One, Gardens of the Moon. So I plan on reading a Dungeon Crawler Carl book in between each of the Malazan books that I'm reading as a sort of palate cleanser. These books are pretty easy to read. I did notice that books 3 through 6 are quite a bit longer. I think book 2 is actually the shortest at only like 340 pages or so. It did look like books 3 through 6 were like all 500 plus pages, so they'll take a little bit more time to get through. But they are pretty quick reads, so I expect that I can wrap up a Dungeon Crawler Carl book in a couple days and then get back to the Malazan series. And honestly, I think that's one of the highlights of this series is they're very interesting. They're quick to jump into, jump out of, um, because the plot isn't super deep and super intricate, but it is very interesting. And it's also just a great palate cleanser when you're in this like really deep fantasy world. Sometimes you need to pull yourself out of it and read something nice and light, to sort of center yourself and then get ready to dive back into this like thing that you have to keep track of so many different characters and all that. In Dungeon Crawler Carl, we've got Princess Donut. There's a couple other characters that we meet here and there, that are fun, that are interesting. There's quirky humor. There's funny events. Carl's tossing bombs left and right. It's really just a good time. So despite it being part of a genre that I don't normally think is that compelling to read, and it's not really something that that pulls me alone, I will continue reading the series, and I hope that I will continue enjoying it as well. From what I've read, from other people's reviews and stuff, the series just um, stays strong. It doesn't really fall off. So I'm hopeful that that is the case, and I'm looking forward to reading more. And let me know if you've read the series and if this is something that's interesting to you or not. I'm curious, from other lit RPG fans, if there's other books like this in the genre that are maybe, this book is very RPG forward, but I feel like there's a thread there that really helps people who aren't into the RPG aspect. That's like pulling me through. So I'm curious if there's other lit RPG books out there that are similar, where they may actually be palatable to people who don't normally like the lit RPG stuff. Despite being a huge fan of video games, it's just like I'm still surprised that I like this book because it feels like I wouldn't like it, and if somebody described it to me, I'd be like, Hell no." But like I do like it. So if there's other lit RPG books like this, and I'm just being completely ignorant, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to add them to the list of maybe palate cleanser books to read in between some of the big series that I'm trying to tackle. And let me know what you think overall of the series in the comments, and I'll see you next time.